Even CEO Kripke putting in a good word for him didn't work? Weren't CEO Kripke and CEO Hiddleston really close friends from school? Troy was still arrogant earlier. But now he couldn't even crack a smile. If he really insisted on signing with nobody else but Elise, then they really had to go and beg her humbly. Jerome's face turned nasty. He had never thought that this matter would become so difficult. What did this Elise do to make CEO Hiddleston so protective of her? Jerome laughed coldly.
Looks like she is pretty good in bed. She usually acts all pure and innocent. It's all an act.
If she hadn't serviced CEO Hiddleston well, why would he protect her like this? If you wanted him to beg Elise now, honestly this was really impossible. He would rather beg a dog than to beg any useless member of Bill's family. Troy's phone started ringing. His face fell even more when he saw who was calling.
It's Grandpa.
Troy was about to cry. He was most afraid of getting a call from Zayden now. But now he was in charge of this project. So if anything went wrong, he would be first to be blamed.
Pick it up,
Jerome ordered. Troy had no choice but to take the call. The consequences of not picking up Grandpa's call was worse.
Grandpa.
Troy greeted his grandfather.
Troy, how's the project with CEO Hiddleston?
Zayden did not beat around the bush. He was most concerned about this project. This project was terribly important, and the Dawsons had invested a lot into it.
Good, everything is going smoothly.
Troy glanced over at Jerome and saw his father hinting at him. He quickly lied.
Once CEO Hiddleston has time, we can get the contract signed.
That's good.
Zayden then said.
You'd better watch this one closely. We cannot lose this project. If anything goes wrong, you are going to get it from me.
He hung up. Troy's palm was all sweaty. He knew all too clearly what sort of temperament his grandfather had. If something happened, it wouldn't be settled as easily as just resigning or getting a beating.
Dad, what do we do now?
Troy was really going to cry. Elise was so despicable. Giving him this difficult task and getting him into such hot water. Jerome looked even worse. Did the two of them really have to go back to Bill and beg for mercy? Earlier they were still arrogant and couldn't care less about Elise and family. If they went to beg her now, wouldn't it be as good as being slapped twice in the face? Jerome couldn't stand the idea of humbling himself for this family. After thinking about it, Jerome said,
Troy, you go. You go and plead with Elise, even if you have to beg her it's okay. Even if you have to kneel down you'd better kneel. As long as Elise gets this contract signed.
Dad!
What, you expect me to do that?
Jerome roared at his son, his eyes bloodshot. Troy wanted to save his pride. But Jerome was even more desperate than his son. If word got out that an elder like him had to beg a younger family member, he would be utterly disgraced. Troy dared not speak up after his father had spoken so fiercely. He was the one who started this mess. If he ended up hurting his father's pride as a result of this, then he was really dead meat. Troy could only clench his teeth and dejectedly made his way towards Elise's house. At this time, Elise and family had started eating. The table wasn't very large. Each person took one side of the table and ate in silence. This was the first time Elise's family had one more person at the table for a meal. And this was their new son-in-law who had married into the family. Bill never talked while eating. While Mary didn't know what to say. She didn't like John. And worse still, he didn't fancy her daughter. But she ended up marrying this completely useless man. but earlier John had come out and spoke up for her. She wasn't blind and couldn't pretend she didn't see any of that. Elise didn't know what to say either. On the contrary, John behaved like he was in his own house and didn't bother with any sort of formality at all.
Mom, you are a really good cook. This is delicious. I don't know when I last ate such good food. Can I have another bowl of rice?
There were more vegetables than meat in the dishes on the table, but John was taking large bites of everything as if these were delicacies. Watching him eat like this made Elise think that he might have gone hungry many times as a homeless man. So before Mary could react, Elise took John's empty rice bowl and got him another bowl.
Thanks, dear.
Elise was holding the rice scoop in her hand when she heard the way he called her, and her hand immediately trembled. Just when it was getting awkward, there was a noise at the door again. Bill looked up and was about to go back into his room when Mary glared fiercely at him, and he didn't dare to move.
Who is it?
Mary shouted out.
Auntie Mary, it's me, Troy.
There was some indignation, but also some helplessness in this voice. Mary and Elise exchanged glances. What was he doing here again? Was he really back to beg Elise just like what John said? Mother and daughter turned to look at John, but he was still busy eating. Mary walked over and opened the door. Troy immediately put a huge smile on his face.
Auntie Mary, are you having dinner? Is Elise in?
Troy put on his most charming face. He'd never smiled like this to even his own father. He poked his head in and saw Elise seated at the table and quickly said,
Elise, what happened earlier was my fault. So I will apologize to you now. I hope you won't take it to heart and let me off this time.
Elise and her parents were stunned by this. Troy was really willing to beg for mercy?
Dawson Group can't do without you. You have not come to work for just one day and the office is a complete mess.
Troy bowed slightly and kept an awkward smile on.
Come back to the office, there are so many projects waiting for you to complete.
That's what he said, but he was scolding her in his heart. Once this project was settled, they'd better watch out.
Where's your dad?
Elise really didn't know how to respond, and once again, John spoke on her behalf. He was shoving food in his mouth as he glanced sideways at Troy.
Why isn't he here?
Troy was getting angry, but kept a smile on his face.
My dad is too busy, so he asked me to come over and apologize to Elise. I hope my new brother-in-law can also forgive me and not hold it against me.
Troy had really humbled himself this time. He'd even apologized to this man who married into the family.
This won't do.
Who would have thought that John merely started shaking his head?
The one who fired Elise is your dad. So he should be the one apologizing. Otherwise, we are not accepting it.
Troy nearly exploded. This man was asking for too much. Troy nearly wanted to shout at him. This maniac was going crazy again or something. Elise and her parents looked back at John, afraid that he would blow this matter up. Troy had already come to apologize, so they shouldn't push this matter too far. It did them no good to offend this father and son.
Dad, Mom, Elise is your precious daughter. So you took care of things when she was bullied.
John swallowed the last mouthful of rice.
Now she is my wife, so if she's being bullied, I am going to take care of it.
He stood up and an intense murderous look flashed in his eyes.
Whoever dares to bully my wife will pay dearly for it.
This terrifying murderous aura suddenly froze the air around them and pressed hard against Troy. So much so he couldn't help but shudder.
John, you'd better not go too far.
Troy couldn't stand it anymore. He was even prepared to kneel. But John didn't even think much of him coming here to apologize. So it was pointless to kneel.
Tell your dad to come here and apologize. Otherwise you will have to bear all the consequences.
John was not polite about it at all.
Still standing there? We are done eating and we didn't leave any for the dog.
This marks the end of Chapter 7. Please subscribe to my channel and comment any suggestions or any other novel you would like to be featured here.